In the winter of 1886, on the Musselshell River in Montana Territory, 7 men of a freight outfit made camp ahead of a storm they could smell coming. They did everything a careful man was supposed to do. They pulled the wagons into a horseshoe against the wind. They pitched 2 wall tents in the lee of a cutbank. They set up a little sheet iron stove in the bigger tent, ran the pipe out through the collar, and fed it good dry cottonwood until the canvas walls glowed the color of weak tea. Then, because the wind came up out of the north like something with a grudge, they banked snow up the sides of that tent, packed it hard with shovels, tied the flap down tight from the inside, and damped the stove down so the fire would hold till morning. They ate beans and fried salt pork. They pulled their boots off. Somebody laughed at something. That is the last thing anybody knows about that night. A hay crew found them 4 days later when the wind quit. 7 men in their blankets, boots lined up neat, stove cold, 3 days of wood still stacked by the door, flour and bacon and coffee untouched in the grub box. Not one of them had a mark on him. The horses, picketed out in the open in that same storm with nothing but their own hides, were alive. Thin and mean and alive. The report that went back to Fort Benton said the blizzard got them, and for the better part of 140 years, that is what the blizzard has been blamed for. But a blizzard does not take a man's boots off and lay him down easy. A blizzard does not leave the wood stacked. The blizzard did not kill those 7 men, friend. A sentence killed them. A friendly, sensible, grandfatherly sentence that everybody in that country believed, and that nearly everybody in this country still believes. A tight camp is a warm camp. Seal it up and keep the heat in. 2 miles down that same river, in that same storm, a camp of lodges stood with people in them, and nobody in those lodges died. Not one. Same wind, same cold, same fire burning all night long. The difference was not toughness, and it was not luck, and it was not some mystery of blood. The difference was a piece of engineering that had been worked out on this continent over thousands of years, and that white freighters looked straight at every day of their lives and never once understood. I will show it to you before we are done. The skill has a name, though nobody calls it by a name anymore. Our people called it making camp. Not pitching a tent, neighbor, making a camp. The old way of it was 6 separate pieces of judgment, done in a fixed order, that turned a piece of open country into a place where a human being could sleep hard, wake warm, drink safe, and walk out in the morning. Your great-great-grandfather could do all 6 of them in about 40 minutes with a hatchet and his own 2 hands, in the dark, in the rain, and he did not think it was remarkable, because everybody he knew could do it too. The knowledge did not start with him. It came down to him the way it came down to my family, hand to hand, from the people who had been camping on this continent since before there was a word for America. I am going to teach you every piece of it, every piece except one, and we will get there. But I want you here by choice, friend, so I will say it plain up front. The last piece is the one that killed those 7 men on the Musselshell, and it is the one nobody sells you, and it is the reason this is worth the 14 minutes. Let me ask you something before we go on. If your power went out tonight in the middle of January and stayed out 3 weeks, and the furnace was a dead metal box and the roads were closed, could you keep your family warm and watered and breathing for a month? Not survive dramatically, just be comfortable and alive and boring. Could you pick the right ground? Could you build a bed off the earth so the cold does not suck the life out of you through your back? Could you burn a fire inside a shelter without poisoning the people you love? Most grown men in this country could not. That is not an insult, it is an inventory. Their great-grandfathers could have done it half asleep with a bad shoulder. Somewhere in 4 generations, we traded the ability for the appliance, and we never got a receipt. Tonight, we are taking a piece of that back. My name is Caleb Wren. My people have been on the same Appalachian Ridge since the 1790s, 7 generations of us, and I am what is left holding the deed. My father died when I was 6, and my granddad Amos raised me from there. Amos learned most of what he knew about living outdoors from an old man named Wesley Owl, from over the Qualla boundary, who took him out the first time when Amos was 11 years old and did not stop teaching him until Wesley died. Amos counted the years from that first trip to the last one he took, and the count came out to 64. 64 years of Cherokee and Creek and Shawnee camp knowledge filtered through one stubborn mountain man, and before the cancer took him, he made me sit at the kitchen table night after night and copy the whole of it into a leather journal in my own handwriting, because he said, a thing you write yourself, you keep. That journal is on the shelf behind me. This channel is me keeping the promise I made him. Now here's the part that ought to make you a little bit angry, and I want you angry at the right thing. This knowledge did not disappear because it quit working. It works right now, tonight, exactly as well as it worked in 1886. It disappeared because between about 1945 and 1975, an entire industry figured out that there was no money in a man who could make a warm, dry camp out of the ground under his feet. And there was tremendous money in a man who believed he needed to buy one. The American recreational camping trade made a fortune the day your family forgot they already knew how. By the end of this, you will have the whole method, all 6 pieces, and you will have the last one, the one that has been the quietest, most thoroughly stripped out step in the whole business, the one they worked hardest to make you forget, because it is free and it is invisible and it does not fit in a shopping cart. Before we get into the meat of it, go on and pull the trigger on subscribe. Not for me, friend. Do it because the buried skills we drag back into daylight around here come one a week, and once you have heard this one, you are going to want the next one. 6 pieces, that is the whole of it. Ground, bed, fire, water, camp discipline, and air. Miss any one of the first 5 and you have a miserable night, a wet blanket, a sick gut, a ruined trip. Miss the 6th one, and you have what they found on the mussel shell, laid out in a row with their boots off. Most beginners get the first 2 mostly right by accident, and they stumble through the middle 3, and then they do the last one exactly backwards, because everything they have ever been taught tells them to do it backwards. And the real question tonight is not what we forgot, neighbor. It is who cashed the check when we forgot it. Picture the first one. It is late afternoon in October, and Wesley Owl is walking the bottom of a cove with my granddad trotting behind him, 11 years old, tired, wanting to quit. There is a beautiful flat spot down by the creek, soft grass, water right there, the prettiest campsite a boy ever saw. Wesley does not even slow down. He walks up out of that hollow, up the side of the ridge maybe 80 feet of rise, and stops on a little shelf of ground in a stand of hardwood with a rock face behind it. And he sets his pack down and says, "We will sleep here." And Amos, who was cold and ill-tempered, said, "Why not down there by the water?" And Wesley said, "Because down there is where the cold goes to lie down." That is piece 1, and it is the piece that decides how hard every other piece is going to be. Where you put your camp matters more than everything you carry in your pack. Cold air is heavier than warm air. When the sun goes off the land, the air chilled by the ground starts to move downhill exactly like water, and it pools in the low places, the hollows, the creek bottoms, the flat meadows. On a clear, still night, the bottom of a valley can run 10 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit colder than a bench 200 feet up the slope. Orchardmen have known this for 100 years, and they have a name for that warm band on the hillside, the thermal belt. It is why apple orchards get planted on slopes and not in hollows. Your camp belongs in that same band, not on the ridgetop where the wind will strip the heat off your body all night, and not in the bottom where the cold pools and the fog forms and the frost lands first. Partway up, on a bench, on a shelf, on a shoulder of ground, with something solid at your back to break the wind, a rock face or a thick stand of evergreen or a cut bank. The rest of the site rules are simple, and they are all about what can come down on you. Look up. Look up before you do anything else. Standing dead trees, hanging broken limbs, a leaning snag with the roots half out of the ground. The old woodsman called those widowmakers, and the name was not a joke. And they come down in the night, in the wind, when you cannot see them coming. Do not camp under one. Do not camp within its length. Look at the ground for the flood line, the little rack of sticks and leaves and grass combed in one direction that says water was here and water will be here again. Camp above it, well above it, because a creek that is ankle deep at supper can be chest deep at 3 in the morning after rain you never even felt. and camp 100 paces back from the water itself, not on top of it. Every animal in that country walks to that water at night. The mosquitoes breed in it, the cold sits on it, and the noise of it covers up every other sound you might want to hear. Say it the way Wesley said it: high enough for warm, low enough for wind. Back to the weather. Look up before you lay down. Water a walk away, every time. That is not folklore, friend. Cold air drainage and the thermal belt are standard material in the frost protection bulletins put out by state agricultural extension services from the 1920s forward, and the United States Forest Service has been writing the same thing about hazard trees and campsites for as long as it has run campgrounds. The federal government spent decades and a great deal of money confirming what an old Cherokee man taught a boy in about 9 seconds on the side of a mountain. The number one botch on this step is the pretty spot. 9 times out of 10, a beginner picks his campsite with his eyes instead of his understanding. Flat grass by the singing water. That is the picture on the front of the catalog, and it is the coldest, wettest, buggiest, most dangerous ground in the whole cove. You will wake at 4 in the morning with frost on your blanket and your knees aching, and you will think you are not tough enough for this, when the truth is you just camped in the bottom of the bowl the cold pours into. Here is your job this week, and it costs nothing. Take one walk, anywhere there is a hill and some woods, and pick out 3 places you could sleep, and say out loud why. Where is the cold going to run tonight? What is standing over that spot that could fall? Where was the water last time it rained hard? That is it. That is the entry ticket, and you will never look at open country the same way again. And once you have got your ground, you have got to deal with the thing that takes more heat out of more people than wind and rain put together, and it is not above you. It is under you. 9 out of 10 first-timers get this exactly backwards and pay for it with a night of shivering they blame on the weather. It is not what you would guess. That is next. Amos told me that the first thing Wesley Owl ever made him do at a camp, before the fire, before anything, was to gather. Not wood, boughs. Hemlock and white pine, cut with a knife, the soft tips only, and dry leaves scraped up out of the deep duff with both hands like a dog digging. And a boy who wanted to be warm right now could not understand why they were making a haystack in the dark instead of striking a light. Because the ground is a thief, neighbor. Your body loses heat 4 ways, and the one that will hurt you at night is conduction, the plain physical transfer of warmth from your body into whatever solid thing is touching it. Earth is a heat sink with no bottom to it. You can lie on the ground under 6 wool blankets and be cold all night long, because every blanket you put on top of you is holding warm air, and the whole underside of you is pressed flat against a planet that is 50 degrees Fahrenheit and does not tire out. The old rule was 2/3 under, 1/3 over. 2/3 of everything you have got goes between you and the earth. The old bed was built like this. You want a mattress of springy dead air, and you want it thick, a handspan or more thick before you lie on it, because it will crush down to 1/3 of that. Evergreen boughs are the classic, laid in rows, shingled like roof shakes, with the cut ends down and the curve up, starting at the foot and working toward the head so each row overlaps the one below. Dry grass works. Cattail leaves work. Bracken fern works. Dry leaves scraped into a pile and packed inside a shirt or a sack work fine and cost nothing. Bark slabs off a dead standing tree work. The one thing that does not work is bare ground, and the one thing that does not work is a thin pad on cold rock. Make it long enough for your shoulders and hips, because those are the 2 places where your weight presses the insulation flat and the cold comes through. Old-timers dug 2 little hollows, one for the hip and one for the shoulder, so a man could lie on his side without his bones bearing on the earth. And if you have got a modern closed-cell foam pad, use it, and put the natural bedding under it anyway, because there is no rule against being warm twice. Say it and remember it. 2/3 under, 1/3 over. Thick as your hand, shoulder and hip, then lie down. This is not romance either. Every piece of cold weather guidance the United States Army has published since the Second World War, every hypothermia protocol taught by wilderness medicine programs, every Forest Service winter travel bulletin says the same thing in more syllables. Ground insulation is the single most important factor in maintaining core temperature while at rest. That is the federal government, at considerable expense, arriving at the exact conclusion a man on the Kuala boundary handed a mountain boy for free in 1890-something. The number one botch on this step is the good sleeping bag on the bad ground. A fellow spends $400 on a bag rated to 0 degrees, throws it straight on the dirt and freezes half to death, and comes home and tells everybody the bag was junk. The bag was fine. A sleeping bag has no magic in it at all. It works by trapping still air in loft, and the loft under you is crushed to nothing under your own weight the second you lie down. You are sleeping on a compressed sheet of nylon on top of the cold earth. Might as well be a bed sheet. And I will tell you the truth about the market here since we are on it. There is a rig you can buy right now, an insulated air mattress with a built-in pump and a phone application to tell you the pressure, and it will run you $300, and it will fail the one time you actually need it because a spark from your own fire found it in the night. Boughs, grass, leaves, and duff cost nothing, have never once punctured, and have kept people alive on this continent for 10,000 winters. And if that mattress is already in your closet, friend, that is not on you. They are very good at selling. Most people are. This week, do one thing. Go lie down on the ground in your own yard for 20 minutes, on the bare dirt, and feel exactly where the cold comes in. Then do it again on top of a foot of raked leaves. That is the entire lesson, and it will cost you 40 minutes and one dirty shirt, and you will never again put your money in the wrong place. Now, with your ground picked and your bed laid, we come to the piece everybody thinks they already understand, and almost nobody does. Because the fire you were taught to build is the wrong shape. Not too small, the wrong shape. And the shape is the difference between a fire you crouch over and a fire that sleeps beside you all night like a warm dog. That is next. Every white man's fire I ever saw as a boy was a cone. A little teepee of sticks with a bright, hot flame in the middle of it, throwing light straight up into nothing, and 4 grown men standing around it, turning like chickens on a spit, faces cooking, backs freezing. Wesley Owl built his fires long and low. My granddad said it took him years to understand why, and about 10 minutes to understand once he finally did. A round fire heats a circle it cannot fill. A long fire heats a line, and a line is the shape of a sleeping man. The old long fire is built as a trench or a bed of coals maybe 5 to 6 feet long and 1.5 feet wide, running parallel to where you are going to lie down, with your bough bed on one side and, if you have got the time and the timber, a reflector wall of green logs or stacked stone, or even a leaned-up slab of bark on the other side, so the heat that would have gone out into the dark comes back across the bed. You are not making a bonfire. A bonfire is a thing you build when you are afraid. You are making a long bed of coals about knee-width away from your bedding, and coals is the operative word, because flame gives light and coals give heat. Wood matters more than technique. Standing dead wood, off the ground, snapped clean with a dry crack. Anything you pick up off the forest floor has drunk the ground and will steam and smoke and sulk. Start small and go up in stages, and do not rush the stages. That is the whole art of it. A nest of tinder that will take a spark, then pencil lead, then pencil, then thumb, then wrist, then arm. That wood, the resin-soaked heart of an old pine stump, will light wet and burn like a candle, and it is lying free in the woods all over the South. Birch bark peels off dead and burns in the rain. Softwoods, your pines and firs, catch fast and burn out fast and throw sparks that will burn holes in everything you own. Hardwoods, your oak and hickory and beech and ash are slower to take, and they are what carries you to morning. The 2-log fire the northern trappers used will hold most of the night. 1 big log laid down, a second big log laid on top with a few coals and kindling wedged between them, and the whole thing burning slow along the seam. Here is the litany: dead and standing, small to large, long, not round. Reflect the heat, bank it for morning, every time. Now let me tell you who took this from you and when. Before about 1950, a camping fire was normal, expected, and the reason people went. Then two things happened at once. The recreational outdoor trade came out of the war with new materials and a hungry sales force, and the federal parks came out of the war with a flood of automobile tourists they could not manage. So between the 1950s and the 1970s, the campfire got steadily replaced by the camp stove, and the pitch that sold it was convenience, and later, conservation. Both of those pitches were partly true. Fire scars are real. Wood is not infinite in a heavily used campground. And there are dry years and dry counties where an open flame is genuinely a crime against your neighbors. I am not standing here telling you to go break a burn ban, but look at what actually got sold in that trade, neighbor. A family that used to arrive with a hatchet and knowledge now arrived with a 2-burner stove, a bottle of white gas, a lantern, and mantles. And every single one of those items had to be bought again and again, forever. Not a conspiracy, just how markets work. Nobody outlawed your hatchet. They just made sure there was no dollar in you knowing, and considerable dollars in you paying somebody else. The number one botch on this step is building the fire before you have got a full arm's load of wood ready in 3 sizes. Beginner lights his tinder, feeds it his little sticks, and then goes wandering off in the dark hunting for the next size up while the whole thing dies behind him. Do the gathering first, all of it, twice as much as you think, then twice again if it is going to be a long, cold night, because everything takes longer in the dark with cold hands. And here is where I confess to you. I was maybe 9 years old, wet November evening, and Amos let me build the fire alone for the first time. I had 6 matches. I used all 6 on green wood I had picked up off the ground because it was closer than the dead stuff standing 40 yards off. We ate cold biscuits and slept cold, and I cried a little where he could not see me. He did not yell. Next morning, he snapped a dead limb off a standing tree, handed it to me, and said, "Hear that crack? That crack is a fire." He said, "Now you know." 30 years later, I still snap a stick before I trust it, and I hear him every time. Your homework this week is $2 and 1 afternoon. Get yourself a chunk of fat wood, or go find an old pine stump and cut into the heart of it where the resin has cured it amber, and shave a pile of curls off it with a knife, and light them with 1 match in your driveway. That is it. Feel how a thing that wants to burn behaves. And then we come to the piece that has killed more people on this continent than fire and cold and bears combined, and I mean that plainly. It is not the wolf, and it is not the winter. It is the water, and the very thing everybody uses to judge whether water is safe is the exact thing that will not tell you. That is next. Pattern break, friend. Everything up to here is the easy part. Ground, bed, fire, that is comfort, and a man can get all 3 wrong and still be alive to complain about it in the morning. What comes now is the hard half. What comes now is where the survival myths were born, where the wagon roads got lined with graves, and where men died for lack of a thing that takes 10 minutes and no money at all. Stay with me. Here is a scene for you. 1850, on the trail west, high summer. A family stops at a clear, cold, spring-fed creek running fast over stones. The water is beautiful. It is so cold it hurts the teeth. The man cups his hands and drinks and says, "You cannot get better water than this anywhere in the world." 2 weeks later, he is burying a child, and he has no idea on this earth what he did wrong, and he never will because he cannot see what is in the water, and nobody in 1850 can explain it to him. Cholera and dysentery killed more people on the overland trails than every wreck, drowning, gunshot, and conflict on that road put together. The water. Always the water. Cold does not mean clean. Clear does not mean clean. Fast does not mean clean. Those are the 3 folk beliefs, and every one of them is a lie, and every one of them still gets repeated. Giardia does not care that the water is cold. Cryptosporidium does not care that it is clear. A dead elk in the creek half a mile above you, or a pasture of cattle, or a beaver pond, or 100 hikers upstream, none of that changes the taste at all. Now, the old people were not helpless about this, and here is what they actually did. First, choose. Running water above any camp, any trail, any pasture, any beaver sign. Springs and seeps where the water comes fresh out of rock or hillside beats surface water every time. Standing water is the last resort and the poorest choice. Second, filter the muck out. The old way was a bandana, sand and charcoal and grass layered in a piece of birch bark, or the trick my granddad liked best, the seep well, which is a hole dug an arm's length back from the edge of a pond or a slow creek. Water seeps sideways into that hole through the soil and comes in cleaner and clearer than what is out in the open. Bail it out and let it fill twice and use the third fill. That gets you clarity. Clarity is not safety. That is the important sentence. Third, and this is the only step that actually makes water safe with nothing but what you already have, boil it. Bring it to a rolling boil and hold it there 1 full minute. Above 6,500 feet of elevation, hold it 3 minutes. That is the current guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and it kills every bacterium, virus, and protozoan you are likely to meet in North American surface water. It does not remove chemicals or heavy metals from mine runoff or a farm field, and I want to be honest with you about that because I am not your public health department friend. If you are downstream of an old mine or an industrial site, do not drink it at all, and there is no shame in that. Better a jug of water carried in from the truck than a hospital bill. But for the ordinary creek in the ordinary woods, 1 rolling minute is the difference between a good week and the worst week of your life. Say it. Choose above. Dig the seep. Strain the mud. 1 rolling minute. 3 up high. Every time. The number 1 botch is the beautiful spring. A man finds water so cold and clean it looks like glass, decides that boiling it would be an insult to it, drinks his fill, and gets giardia, which takes 1 to 2 weeks to show up. By the time he is sick, he is home, and he blames a gas station sandwich, and he never learns a thing, and he does it again next year. And while we are here, let me set the gadget beside the old way one time. There is a countertop water purifier sold right now with an ultraviolet lamp and a phone application and a subscription filter cartridge that runs upward of $700 and will not work 1 minute after the power goes out. A stainless steel pot and a fire will run you under $20 at any thrift store on any road in America. Works in a blackout, works forever, never sends a bill, and has been making water safe since before the pyramids. That is not nostalgia, that is arithmetic. This week, put a plain metal container in your vehicle. Single wall stainless, no plastic, no insulated double wall, because a double wall bottle cannot be put in a fire. A single wall bottle, or an old Bitly pot, means you can boil water anywhere there is fuel. That is your whole task, and it might be free out of your own cabinet. Now, with your ground picked, your bed built, your fire long, and your water safe, we come to the piece that separates a camp from a mess, and it is the piece that will decide whether something with claws comes to visit you at 2 in the morning. And the mistake here is one that even experienced people make, because it feels like the polite thing to do. That is next. Amos told me the thing that struck him hardest all those years going out with Wesley Owl was how tidy an old camp was. Not fussy, ordered. Everything had one place, and it went back to that place the second it was done being used. And the reason was not neatness. The reason was that in the dark, cold, and half asleep, with your hands numb, you have got to be able to put your hand on the knife, the fire kit, and the water without looking. And because the camp itself is a signal that goes out into the woods for a mile in every direction. This is camp discipline, and it is 5 habits. First, cook away from where you sleep. 100 feet or more, downwind, and the old northern rule is a triangle. Sleeping in one corner, cooking in another, food storage in the third. Grease smoke settles into fabric and hair and stays. You do not want the place you lie down to smell like supper. Second, store the food up and off and away. Hang it or put it in a hard container 12 feet up and 6 feet out from the trunk if you are hanging. And in bear country, use the approved canister if the land requires one. That is not just bears, that is raccoons and mice and porcupines, and a porcupine will chew a leather boot to ribbons overnight for the salt in it. Third, everything with a smell goes with the food. Toothpaste, soap, the wrapper in your pocket, the bacon grease, all of it. Fourth, police the ground before dark. Every tool back in its place, wood stacked under cover, boots and socks where they will not be reined in and where they cannot fall into the coals. Fifth, and the old people were absolute about this one, leave the camp better than you found it, because you are coming back, and so is somebody else, and the poles you stack in a dry place today are the poles that save a stranger's life in a storm 3 winters from now. Litany. Cook away. Hang it high. Smell goes with the food. Everything in its place by dark. Leave it ready for the next man. Every time. The #1 botch is feeding wildlife by laziness. A man scrapes his plate at the edge of camp, or dumps his dishwater 10 feet from the tent, or leaves a candy bar in a coat pocket. That plate scraping is not a small thing. It teaches a bear that people are food, and a bear that has learned that is a dead bear inside of 2 years, and it may take a person with it first. The old rule was that you do not make an animal into a beggar, because you have ruined it and it will be killed for what you taught it. Your homework this week is a 5-minute inventory. Take whatever bag you keep in your truck and pull out everything that has a smell and put it in one sealed bag, and put a length of cord in there too, 40 feet of paracord, $3, so that you can hang it. That is the whole exercise, and it is the difference between an interesting night and a bad one. Pattern break, friend. Now we come to it. Everything I have given you so far is comfort and good sense, and the kind of thing that makes a trip pleasant. What comes now is the one that fills the graves. This is the piece that killed the 7 men on the mussel shell, and it kills people in this country every single winter, right now, in the modern age, in tents and campers and garages and houses. And the reason it keeps killing is that everything about it feels correct while it is happening. This is the piece that was quietly stripped out of the talk, and I want you to hear it all the way to the end. Go back to that tent. It is dark. The wind is a solid thing outside. The sheet iron is ticking as the stove cools down toward a red bed of coals. It is warm in there. It is genuinely warm, for the first time in 3 days, and the canvas is glowing tea-colored, and there is that good smell of pork fat and wood smoke and wet wool drying. And a man in the corner says the words that kill them all, and it is the kindest, most sensible sentence in the world. Let us bank that snow up a little higher and pull the flap tight, boys. No sense heating the whole territory. So they seal it. And then they damp the stove down, close the draft to make the wood last, and lie down in the warm dark. And the fire, choked of air, stops burning clean. That is the whole mechanism. A fire with plenty of air burns its fuel completely and gives off carbon dioxide, which is harmless in a camp. A fire starved of air burns incompletely and gives off carbon monoxide, and carbon monoxide has no color and no smell and no taste and no warning of any kind. It binds to your blood 200 times more readily than oxygen does, so your blood fills up with a gas that cannot carry oxygen, and your body does not register suffocation because you are still breathing fine and your lungs are still full. You get a headache. You get sleepy. You get a little confused, just enough that you cannot solve the problem, and the confusion is part of the poisoning. And then you sleep, and you do not wake up, and the color it leaves in the skin is a healthy cherry pink, which is why for 100 years those bodies got described as looking peaceful, like men who simply froze in their sleep. 7 men, 3 days of firewood stacked by the door. Horses alive on the picket line in the open because horses have never once sealed themselves into anything. And 2 miles away, a camp of lodges with fires burning all night long and not a soul harmed, because those lodges were built by people who had solved this problem completely and had solved it so long ago that the solution was simply the shape of the house. Here it is. A lodge that burns fire inside is not a sealed bag. It is a chimney with a room in it. There is an opening at the top, the smoke hole, with 2 flaps on poles that can be swung to catch or block the wind so the draw never reverses. And down at the ground, there is a second opening you cannot see from outside, because inside the lodge, hung from about shoulder height on the poles and tucked under the bedding at the floor, there is a liner. Cold outside air comes in under the cover at the bottom, gets caught behind that liner, and is carried straight up the inside of the wall and out the top, dragging the smoke with it. That is a continuous, unstoppable current of fresh air moving through the room from bottom to top all night without anybody tending it. That is not decoration, friend. That is an air handling system made of hide and poles, and observers from the Smithsonian's Bureau of American Ethnology wrote it down in careful detail in the late 1800s and early 1900s, because even then it was clearly a superior piece of engineering. It does something else too, that liner. It stops the draft from crossing the bed, and it catches the condensation that runs down the inside of the cover and carries it to the ground outside the sleeping area, which is why they called it a dew cloth. So here is the rule, and it is the whole of the last piece, and it applies to a teepee and a wall tent and a camper and a garage and your own kitchen. Anything that burns needs air low and air high, and it needs both at once. One opening is not ventilation, it is a hole. Air must come in low and leave high, or nothing moves. Never ever damp a fire down inside a closed space to make it last. Never bring a charcoal grill or a hibachi or a camp stove or an unvented gas heater into a tent, a camper, a car, a garage, or any room you will sleep in. Charcoal is the worst of the lot because it makes enormous carbon monoxide with almost no flame and no smoke to warn you. And the Consumer Product Safety Commission has been begging Americans about this specific thing for 50 years. If you use a wood stove in a tent, it must have a proper pipe with good draw through a fireproof jack. The draft must stay open, and you keep intake open at the bottom of the tent, and you put a battery-powered carbon monoxide alarm in there at head height, which costs about $20 and is the single best $20 in the outdoors. I am not your fire marshal, friend, and I will tell you straight, if you are not certain your setup breathes, do not burn anything inside it. Sleep cold and insulated and alive. There is no shame in that. Better a chilly night than a pink-cheeked morning nobody wakes up from. Learn the master litany. Air in low, air out high. Never seal what burns. Never damp it down to sleep. Cold and breathing beats warm and closed, every time. And now the arithmetic. It took 1 hour of shoveling snow up against the canvas and 1 turn of a damper knob. About 90 seconds of decision at the end of a careful, competent, well-run day. 7 men. And the terrible part, the part that ought to stay with you, is that every single thing they did that night, they did because they were trying to take good care of each other. If you have done this wrong, and most of us have, hear me. I have slept in a sealed tent with a lantern going. My granddad ran a kerosene heater in a closed shed for years and outlived 4 of his brothers. And he did it on nothing but dumb luck and drafty boards. But dumb luck is not a ventilation system. Knowing is. And nobody hid this from you, neighbor. When the industry moved everybody into sealed nylon tents with sewn-in bathtub floors and coated flies in the 1960s, and then sold them portable heaters to go inside, the warnings got printed in small type on a tag nobody reads, and the reason the knowledge did not come with the product is simply that there was never any money in reminding you. That is all it ever was. So here's the whole thing, start to finish. Pick your ground high enough for warmth and low enough for wind. Back to the weather. Look up before you lay down. Water a walk away. Build your bed thick as your hand, 2/3 under and 1/3 over, shoulder and hip. Build your fire long and not round, dead and standing wood, small to large. Reflect the heat, bank it for morning. Take your water from above, dig the seep, strain the mud. 1 rolling minute, 3 up high. Keep your camp in order, cook away, hang it high. Smell goes with the food, everything in its place by dark, and leave it ready for the next man. And then, when the night closes down and the fire is the only warm thing in the world, remember the last piece. Air in low, air out high. Never seal what burns. Never damp it down to sleep. Cold and breathing beats warm and closed. That is the whole method. That is the skill Wesley Owl handed my granddad over 64 years. And that is the skill those 7 freighters on the Muscle Shell died without. And now it is yours. This was never really about a tent or a fire pit, neighbor. It was about being a person who cannot be shut off. If the power goes out, your family stays warm. If the trucks stop, your family drinks safe water. If the roads close, you know where to put your back against the wind and how to sleep off the cold ground and how to burn a fire without it killing the people in the room. That is not survivalism. That is not doom talk. and I have got no interest in scaring anybody. That is ordinary competence, the plain adult ability to take care of your own, that got quietly taken from you and sold back at a markup, and that you just took back tonight for free. Here is your one small Saturday. Pick a fair evening. Take a single wall pot, a hatchet, a wool blanket, $5 of fat wood, and a $20 battery carbon monoxide alarm, and go no farther than your own back field or a spot you know. Rake up a foot of leaves for a bed. Build a long fire beside it instead of a round one. Boil a pot of water 1 full minute and make coffee with it. And sleep out one night with nothing sealed and nothing burning under a roof. One night. That is the entrance to all of it, and everything else in this video will make sense in your hands the next morning in a way it never can in your ears. Now tell me something in the comments. What did your grandparents do that I did not say? Different country did this different ways, and I know it because a Minnesota camp and a Sonoran camp and a Cherokee camp in the Smokies do not solve the same problems. Somebody's grandmother knew a way to keep a bed dry in a swamp. Somebody's grandfather learned the smoke flap trick from a man who learned it from his mother. Tell me the version your people kept, and tell me where they kept it, because the story that gets the most comments is the story I go deep on next. Next time, the 2-cent pit trick the old people used to keep a fire alive and hidden for 3 days without tending it. The same trick that fed hunting parties for a week at a time on 1 load of wood. And the decade the portable stove trade made good and sure your grandmother forgot it. Keep the old ways they kept.